With us now in the studio, the Amazing Kreskin. So glad to have you in our studio.
And this show's live.
It is live now.
You know, I gotta, I have to warn people if they, just to be careful what you hear, because can you folks imagine if I read Jeremy's thoughts on the air?
Please don't do
God.
that. Please don't do that. I was worried. When I found out you were coming on the show, that was my first thought.
You're kidding me.
Please don't read my mind.
I got to tell you, I've had such a working relationship with so many people in business, and that's always the great line. Like right now in the state in New Jersey, Governor Christie is our governor, and of course he's, we are having an election in the United States coming up shortly. They've been campaigning now for about 30 years to run for office. But anyway, Christie has had me at a couple of affairs. Now, I have not supported him. I don't want to reveal my political position, because if I can warn a number of people in show business to be aware of this, you do that and you alienate part of your audience. So even though I've predicted elections and what have you, and it's not because of preference or anything. So Christie had me at a number of events because they were in Essex County where I live. And the first one, he says, Kreskin, you've been on David Letterman, and I've been on, I like the man, and I said, I think he's a neat person. I'm going to show you a calling card that he kind of endorsed for me. And he said, why don't you and I go on together? And I said, Governor Christie, that'd be great. I'd love to go on with you, and then I'll read your thoughts on the air. And Christie said, maybe we better not go on together. So I thought it was a great line from a politician, you know what I'm saying? But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, take it away,
You
sir.
said that you're the one that started saying I've been around for a long time. I haven't been around that long, but since everybody knows about it, it's gotten out, I might as well take advantage of the last January 12th, I had a special event in New York celebrating a birthday in which I got nothing to eat. I didn't eat a thing at my birthday party. I didn't eat even any cake. I didn't drink a darn thing, because by the time I said hello to each of the 120 or so people, the 3 hours had gone by. But it was my 80th birthday, and it was interesting because, a lot of people, the rumors have been out that I was born in the 1860s, but that's not true. I was born in 1884, and so it doesn't add up right. But at the same time, I've been very happy with my work. I've done the airline industry estimates I've flown over 3 million miles now.
Wow.
That's as of a few years ago, over 3 million.
You started out when you were, I believe, 9 years old?
Yeah, with an incident. I was, by the way, when I was 5 years old, it was a neat moment in my life. I'm Polish-Italian, and I was visiting my Polish side of the family, which was in Bethlehem, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and a young man gave me a comic book. Interesting story about this, because I opened it up, and there was a cartoon character in it called Mandrake, called Mandrake the Magician, who in the Second World War, when Italy was, along with Germany and so forth, were amongst the axis of powers that were fighting, Mussolini had to deal with this because the most popular cartoon amongst the Italian people was Mandrake. He didn't know what to do. Lee Falk was writing it. And he got a movie director to rewrite all the words in it. But the interesting thing is that years later, I met Lee Falk. I decided I wanted to be like Mandrake because he wasn't a magician. He had hypnotic abilities. He read people's thoughts. And I'm going to be like this person. And just about 8 or 9, Lee Falk is gone now, but they had a big event for him at Sardi's in New York, the famous restaurant. And all these professors said, and these cartoon aficionados said, Kreskin, we know how meaningful that moment was in your life. Why don't you come and attend? So I did, and I said hello to Lee Falk, and he had a Q&A period. It's one of the greatest moments of my life. In the middle of answering all these questions with these 100 and some authorities on the comic book history, he stopped and said, since I've been writing Mandrake in 1935, the only living human being coming closest to what he was in my cartoon was Kreskin.
Wow.
And that was such a that really moved me very deeply, you know. Of course, people didn't realize I hypnotically interviewed him, influenced him before the talk. But then when I was 9 years old, it was raining outside. I was in third grade, and Miss Curtis was the teacher. And she said, well, you're not going to go out and play. I'm going to teach a game. So she sent one of my classmates out in the hallway. Her name was Jane Hamilton. I can remember this very vividly. And while she was out, we hid a beanbag in the classroom. I remember we put it in someone's desk. So Jane comes back in, and Miss Curtis says, Jane, walk around. Your classmates will say you're getting warm. If you're near it, you're getting cold. If you're not near it. If you're real close, you say you're getting hot. Be hot and cold. So she found the beanbag, and I was very, very disappointed that she never picked me to try to play the game or what have you. So I'm walking home, a mile home, which was the way I walked every day, going from grade school to kindergarten to senior year in school. We always walked. My brother's at home, 3 years younger. My father's at work, and I said, Joe, I got a game. I want to play it with you. Let's walk over to Grandma and Grandpa's house. It was a 2-story house my grandfather from Italy, Sicily, built with his own hands. It's still there. They're renting the downstairs to make ends meet. I said, here's a penny. Go upstairs and hide this penny. So he goes upstairs, and he calls me. He says, I've hidden it. I walk upstairs. I walk into this old-fashioned kitchen with pot-belly stoves. My grandmother didn't speak English, is sitting behind the table thinking, what's going on? I meandered through the kitchen into my uncle's bedroom. He was at work. Climbed up on a stool because I was short and found myself reaching behind a curtain rod and suddenly felt the penny. And then it dawned on me. I forgot to tell my brother to talk to me. He never spoke to me. We never said anything.
Right.
Wow.
My grandmother, who saw this, being Italian, must have thought I had the evil eye. But the family found out. It got around to private parties. My 4th and 6th grade teacher became interested in what I was doing. I was starting to perform. I was getting paid for performances when I was 12 years old, getting big money, $5 a show.
A lot of money back then.
Well, there was no minimum wages then. And, you know, in show business, anybody going to show business, any of you youngsters going to show business want to think in terms of minimum wages, don't go into show business. Stay a mile away. The only way to succeed is to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And so now, as a result of that, and that includes tonight at the, is it Century Casino?
8 o'clock.
In every show, all over the world. I did it here 2011 with an outdoor fair of I don't know how many thousands here in Edmonton in 2011. But tonight I will turn my check over to a committee from the audience I've never met. It's usually 6 people. And I am then escorted from the room, the nightclub, or if it's a theater like Carnegie Hall, I'm escorted from the building. At the State Fair last 2011, they had a truck out on the grounds next to my stage, and the police and others took me into the truck, and the doors were closed because the windows were all barricaded. Anyway, so tonight I will leave the showroom, and while I'm out, my check will be hidden anywhere in the entire show. When I come back, then when I'm called back in, the committee's on stage. I don't ask anybody to talk to me. No questions are asked. They must think of what they've done. And if I don't find my check, I forfeit the entire sum. It goes to the people who booked me, shows for free. When Willie Nelson had me for for many years, he had fundraisers for farming groups and what have you. And this was an outdoor event. And Willie Nelson didn't do he said, Kreskin, could you do a headlining thing? And I said, I'd be happy to, Willie. So they put me in a trailer, closed everything up, and they hid my check anywhere in the entire fair that he put together, anywhere. And he kept saying that people both, he says, what is he going to do? No, he's not going to do this. You're crazy. And there, I can remember him standing there, not saying a word. I come out of the trailer, and one of the committee that hit, I said, I want you to concentrate on where it's hidden. Jeremy, I can't forget this incident. I walk through the crowd. It's all outdoors, of course. And I end up laying on the ground and reaching my hand under the dirt where I found the check was hidden under an outhouse.
Wow.
Nelson, he said, this is insane. This can't really.
Right.
So I've had, you remember years ago, there was it may not have been here in Canada, but there was a network in the States called the Nashville Network.
Sure, yeah.
And I took it over many times when the host went on vacation, the hour and a half and what have you, and worked with everybody in the industry. I think why I feel so a bond with country music people is that they remember their roots. It's not a business where when they achieve great success, you just ignore the past. They've often embraced that past as part of their success. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's flavorful.
The Amazing Kreskin with us right now.
I could talk to you for hours,
no,
by the way.
I mean, I could listen to you for the next 3 hours. I really could.
If I had the time. Someday, by the way, folks, someday I'm going to come on when there's more time. The flights, with the weather was crazy.
Right.
The flight to, I was in Grand Prairie yesterday from New Jersey in the States because of not getting a direct flight. Took 13.5 hours.
Wow.
So I'm booked, by the way, next week on Mars. It's going to be a shorter flight.
61 times you were on Mr. Johnny Carson's
Well, let me
Tonight
explain
Show.
that. Carson never forgave NBC. You never mention it to him on the air, but privately, he had some 4-letter words. I did 88 shows with Carson.
Wow.
But the first 2 years of the Johnny Carson Show were all erased because in the early days of television, people didn't realize that I did Mike Douglas Show, 118 shows. Oh, the people who were first on, some of them, their legendary names are gone for good. That's why when he found out what happened, a lot of Carson's shows are now encased in concrete in different parts of L.A. and what have you. But we had quite a great working relationship, and he was a very quiet man off camera, very quiet, but he was very protective of me. And I only told this story about 2 years ago. A man came on and said, I'm going to do a Kreskin. Now, one time Carson started as a magician. He was doing a magic act and all this jazz. And Fred DeCordova, who's gone now, when Johnny died, he says, I want to tell you the story behind this. And Fred said, this person said to Johnny, I'm going to do a Kreskin. And this was during a break. And Fred said, Johnny slowly turned his head towards the man and said, what did you say? Now, this is not on the air, but all the audience and all the NBC, the people working on the show heard this. What did you say? He said, I'm going to do a Kreskin. You're not on Monday. And Johnny says, well, I always take off. He says, I'm going to do it. The man didn't know that Johnny came to work that night. He told his crew if this ever got out, he would fire them. Wow. He was not to know this. He hid on the set. Why would the guy who owns the show hide on the set? This man came out and did something where he had people call out numbers, and they were written on a blackboard. And then someone in the audience, he says, come forward. I gave you an envelope before the show. And the guy opened it because this is his prediction. He opened it up. It was the wrong total. It wasn't right. And after that, the next guest to come on said to his friend, this actor whom he knew, he says, you just laid the biggest bomb you ever laid. Well, it isn't that he failed. When Johnny Carson found out that this man had in the audience a man sitting with an adding machine, adding, and 30 people in the audience saw this, and he edited it wrong and put it in. It wasn't that it was even wrong, that he was using it, and the thing was phony, and he was very close to this man. And when it was all over and he found out what happened, he says, you will never perform on the show. He was talking to Orson Welles, one of the greatest producers of movies in history. But Wells, whom I knew, told me, he said, Kreskin, it was the stupidest mistake I ever made. I could go on with scores of stories about Carson.
Did you and Mr. Carson have a tight-knit relationship?
Yeah, it was very... he never allowed anyone in his dressing room. And I came back from a trip, and I said to the crew, I have to see him before the show. They said, well, no, we didn't allow it. But I explained, and they said, by the way, NBC called me. I was in the Midwest because I've done over 1,000 university shows in Canada, the United States. I was at a university there performing. And the secretary, someone called from NBC and said, you're going to do this with Johnny next week, aren't you? I said, yes. They said, you're not to do this. It's okay. You don't argue with NBC, the Pope, or the good Lord, I guess. But I said nothing. So the night I was at this college, I get a call during the day from Carson's secretary, who always would call me on the phone and tell me aside. She says, Johnny wants to talk to you. I said, well, he never calls me on the phone. She says, Kreskin, please. I said, okay, I'll be back in my hotel around 11 o'clock. So I had a call from Johnny, and he says, Kreskin, I says, Johnny, is everything all right? He says, have you been getting calls from NBC? I said, yes. He says, well, you know how I feel about them. I said, technical words he used, Jeremiah, that were 4-letter words. I don't want to go into it now. He says, you know what they told you not to do? I said, yeah. He says, we're going to do it. So a few days later, I fly back to New York, New Jersey. I come to the studio, and his secretary's taking me to his office. This is before the show. She says, Kreskin, nobody sees him before the show. I said, well, doesn't anyone coming? She says, yeah, but is everything okay? I said, don't worry. She says, and she's shaking. Nobody sees him before. So I walk in. Johnny sat by a desk the way you are sitting, but there's no TV cameras. There's one big light on the table, and he's got all kinds of papers. His monologue was the most important thing. Every show, that was the most important thing, bar nothing. He said, you want to talk to me? I said, John, I want you to look in my eyes. I want you to concentrate, and on and on. Finally opened his eyes. 10 minutes later, I said, I'll see you later, Johnny. So later on, he introduces me and says, we have something special tonight. Kreskin, would you come out here? I walk out, and he nudged me like this in front of the camera, and I looked, and then next to the Cordova were 3 men in suits. He was telling me, this is those SOBs, NBC, people who said you can't do this. He just revered this moment. Right? So and now Ed McMahon and did not know what I was going to do, and he's standing over here. And I said, Johnny, stand straight. We have 2 chairs here. I want you to listen to my voice. So I'm talking to him, Doc Severinsen standing here. His eyes closed, and his body was becoming rigid. And I said, just trust me, Johnny, because you're going to fall uncontrollably shortly. And I said, Ed, be ready. And they don't know what the hell to do.
Right.
They caught him, and I said, you stretch him between the 2 chairs. His head and shoulders, his feet there. There's no magic trick. There's nothing in the middle of him. And there's a lady on the show. I said, come over here. She says, no. She was a guest. I said, please come over. She saw me a year or 2 ago at lunch, and she said, I thought I'd never be asked on again. I said, why don't you come over? And she wouldn't. And finally, Ed McMahon says, come over here. And she said, I want you to sit on him. She says, what? Sit in the middle of him. Now, Johnny did not allow photographers in the studio. He did not allow them. I had a photographer there. It was in Parade magazine 2 weeks later, over the Western world. There she's sitting on him. We finally lift her off of him, and we finally stand him up, and slowly I count. His eyes open, his body is now motion. He said, I would have thought it was a baby. And we thanked her. That lady who was terrified of doing it was Bette Midler.
Wow.
And last year, a year and a half ago, Jimmy Fallon said, you did Johnny's show before he went to L.A. here. You know all the places? I said, yes. He said, where did you do that with him? I said, there. He says, we're going to do it. And you can look on the internet. I stretch him between 2 chairs. Nobody sits on him. I climb up and stand on him. And NBC repeated the show 1 week later and repeated a second time, which they never do that. So the stories are, my work has been like an adventure.
It must have been a heck of a, you're what? I don't want to.
80 years old.
Yeah, you're many years old. You've had quite the life. Do you ever go back on YouTube or whatever? And
they're all over these shows.
They are. We were just watching
the Amazing World of Kreskin shows are being repeated all over there.
Right. We were just watching the clip with David Letterman earlier today as well when you did the card trick with him.
Do you know? I got to tell you because I want the folks to, and I should have. You're amongst the first to have this announced on. I'm like. Oh, by the way. A few months ago, a very famous boxing promoter hired me to work with a gal by the name of, they call her the Heat, but her name's Hardy, Heather Hardy. And I worked with her. She's a boxer, a female boxer. I couldn't make her stronger. I'm not into something like that. I dated a girl when I was a kid who her father taught boxing, but only amateur boxing for a school system, what have you. And I conditioned her to be more alert to the blows before they come. Because if you look at those horrendous last fights with Muhammad Ali, and I did television shows with Carson many times, every time your head is hit, no matter how healthy you are, your brain bounces. Look at what's happened in football.
Right.
So she won the fight I conditioned her for. So did 2 of his other boxers. And last October, she said, I want Kreskin to work with me. So she fought in New York. I didn't know people paid $1,000 for the front seats of these fights.
Yeah.
So I had worked with her, and they had me there as special, of course, there. And she fought for the junior featherweight champion and won, and had me in the ring for about 15 minutes. What an exciting thing. She's a pretty gal, and that's her right there, Heather. So you hold on to that.
Yeah.
But what I've got to now, there's another match coming up in a month or so, an international big fight in Vegas, and it's early in May. You'll hear how I'm involved. I can't let it out right now. It's a surprise. But the other thing, I got to tell you, it's launched yesterday. This is exciting. I'm like a kid right now. I don't want you to think I'm excited, but I really took a year to put this together. I'll give you this. It is the first in history. It is a international, because I kept getting mails from people all over the world about the unknown, whether it has to do with things I don't particularly believe in or things I do believe in. Like I'm not convinced of ghosts, but I get endless. I could talk to you hours about ghost research, my work dealing with telepathy and what have you. Everything on the face of the earth, and it's going to be a paranormal meeting place where people around the world can get together. And it's going to be, I'm excited about it because it's going to be called the Kreskin Supernatural Dating Society, worldwide, and people can get a hold of me.
I definitely have to find out more information.
You gotta
on
find.
this.
I'm excited because you know what's going to be there. It's going to people believe in it or don't believe in it can communicate and talk. And a psychiatrist, Dr. Sunan, who's been very, very fine in the States, wrote me yesterday and said, Kreskin, something like this is needed. It's not just a gimmick. People can talk about it. I don't believe in astrology, but I have friends who are, and I can talk to you about the origin of it. It's going to be, I think it's exciting and it's different, So you're only the second day we're launching it. I got to tell you this.
The Amazing Kreskin joining us right now. We're going to go pretty soon, but I got a personal question for you.
Personal. Oh my God! I have to be honest about some kind of bond between the two of you here. Is that what we're talking about?
She has a big crush on me.
She's telling me about this, and
borderline stalking.
I got to tell people, you folks listening in are probably wondering, how much for real is this going to be between the two of them? What is their, is this going to continue? I just got the vibrations. Now I meet, by the way, I've talked to the two of them. They're good folks. They're flaky, but they're wonderful people. And listen, those are the only interesting people. You've got to understand. I think there's going to be more of a bond. Ooh. And it may be, whether it is personal or it could be professional in a way that you folks haven't thought of right now. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Because this is an exciting business.
It is.
And it has right and left turns all over the place. It really, people that are now hosting on shows where they're hosting a show never even thought they'd be doing that in the past. So I think you got a longer future between each other. But as far as anything else, folks, I gotta stifle myself because I don't write a column like that. Although in certain days I would be. Tonight I'm going to be and this time we're going to be seeing. I look forward to your listeners, and I'm going to be seeing you again. By the way, I know that.
The Amazing Kreskin joining us. Big fan of yours. Have fun at the show.
And I will tell you this. I want to say this to you because I've done thousands of shows in radio and also on television, and in the spirit of broadcasting, I'm not going to say goodbye to you and your listeners. Let's just say to be continued, okay?
Yeah. Well, we hope you come back.
I will. That I foresee.
The Amazing Kreskin. Catch him tonight at the Century Casino in Edmonton. 8 o'clock, the show starts. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure.